Hello and welcome to Certified Angus Beef Brands, the importance of marbling. Did you know that marbling equals great flavor, juiciness, and tenderness? Well, it's true. And today we're going to talk more about it. Today with me, I have two wonderful colleagues. I am Laura Newberry-Yokley. I am the Assistant Director of International and Multicultural Marketing. I also have with me Martin Lemoyne. He is the Director of Canadian Business Development. And today I have Chef Gavin Pinto, the Test Kitchen Manager. All right, Martin, here we go.
Well, thank you for the quick introduction here. What I want to be able to run today is really defining some of the trends that we're seeing affecting our landscape and the benefit that it relates back to marbling. So really what I want to be able to say is the quick defining the trends, addressing profitability and portability, and really highlighting your palates by showing a video of Chef Gavin cooking some short ribs. Did you know that from 2000 to 2018, the internet penetration went to jump 2.6 times, but it took 18 years to get to that level of sophisticated connection to internet at home. During the same period of time, in 2020, we went from almost less than 4% of people working remotely to addressing in March of 2020, 39.1% of people working remotely from home. And that has changed drastically also the landscape. Not only did we have the restaurant closing, but the people that were close to the restaurant at their work area are now staying at home, changing even the way they're looking for meal option. And we all have always said how important it is to keep our presence in the media and on social media very present to bring customer in. The reality of today, consumers are shopping differently, whether it's their interest of shopping online. We're seeing also these customers shopping remotely for meal to go, and that is a really occurring trend. What's the challenge with that trend? I just did a Google search, and it's the interesting components. If you're not there, if you're not present on the internet, you're losing out. And I did a search that you can see down the road with Uber Eats. Out of Toronto, I searched for burger option, and out of Montreal, I searched for burger option. And each of the city was giving me over 200 choice all the time. Same thing in Vancouver, same thing in Calgary. If you're looking at all the major cities, you're finding more and more people trying to get attention to consumers around buying from them. And that's really trending a lot. And I love the reference that, we're seeing a lot more ghost kitchen, and we're seeing Circle K, that is a gas station, but talks about the having barista because they want to capture more of that closer to home proximity in regards of the meals and meal plan. The other elements we have to consider around meal plan is the streaming service and how people today, whether it's in Canada or US, are streaming with family and household gathering. So if you're not going to a restaurant for dining, there's a good chance you're planning with friends potentially to have a dining at home. Well, if you're doing if you want to reach that customer, you need to ensure that you always offer them quality, and taste is number one in regards of delivering quality. And on that, that's where it brings me to some more conversation around profitability and portability, because there's one opportunity that we're seeing that is emerging from that trend, and that's the versatility of having meal that travels well. And on that, Certified Angus Beef have done a lot of research. And we even have culinary trends and culinary tips and tricks that we can offer you guys. But one of the elements I want to focus a little bit more attention is on the benefit of marbling when it comes to product that has to travel. And really, you're finding the interest of high marble beef in the middle cuts, like you can see from the rib that is a Certified Angus Beef versus a AAA. But the beauty of that, you also find it with the end cuts. And that's where, if I can invite Chef Gavin video, I would love that we can show a little bit more of the Chef Gavin video and talk a little bit more with Chef Gavin on the culinary trend that we're seeing with those end cuts offering so much versatility for travel option.
So often when we think about eating beef, it's a knife and fork kind of food. Today, we're gonna make the ultimate beef finger food, Korean grilled short ribs. This isn't a traditional Korean marinade. We've switched it up with a few common ingredients that we think work nicely with this cut. We'll start with a 1/4 cup of soy sauce, a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar, which replaces the rice vinegar in this recipe, a little bit of oil, and then 3 tablespoons of honey. Then we'll give it a quick whisk to combine before adding the rest of the ingredients. We'll use 4 cloves of minced garlic for this recipe. All you need to do is give them a good smash and then mince them. There's no need to be super precise with knife cuts here. A good amount of garlic really adds a ton of flavor to the marinade. Next comes the ginger. Normally I would peel this with a spoon, but it's a pretty even shape to just slice the skin right off. Ginger is so aromatic and flavorful that it permeates the air while I'm mincing it, and it really will add a nice punch to the beef. Finally, thinly slice up some scallions on a bias. I like to use the more tender green tops for a garnish at the end, so I'll set those aside. Cut the root end of the scallion whites, then split them in half lengthwise and give them a good mince. I like to use the firmer white ends of the onions for the marinade because they are more fibrous and they don't get super soggy when sitting in the liquid. Now that I've got this all mixed up, I'm gonna get these beautiful certified Angus beef short ribs into my marinade, and you wanna let it sit as long as possible, maybe overnight. More than that isn't really necessary, but because they're cut so thin, that marinade really helps to penetrate, and there's just such great flavor and marbling in these short ribs, I can't wait. We'll use a zip-top plastic bag to marinate these short ribs. Using a bag like this helps to distribute the marinade all around the ribs and ensures an even coating of that delicious marinade. Once all of the marinade is in there, you'll want to move the short ribs around to make sure it coats them and gets in between all the spaces of the short ribs. You want to make sure that the marinade coats well for maximum flavor. Push as much air out as possible before refrigerating them to marinate. I would also advise putting this in a container in the case that any of the marinade leaks. It's important to get the coals good and hot before grilling these short ribs. And for a little extra flavor, I like to put a couple chunks of wood in the coals because it adds that little touch of smoke. Once they have had ample time to marinate, get the short ribs right onto that grill. You'll want to sear them over super high heat because they cook really quickly, and you want to develop a good crust in a very short amount of time. The marinade starts to caramelize immediately, so you'll want to move fast. To serve, I like to pile them high on a plate and serve them family style. We've got a sweet and savory finger food that everybody's gonna love. Let me tell you, these smell amazing. I can't wait another second, I gotta dig in. These are seriously one of my favorite foods. They're sticky, sweet, savory, and super rich. I love these beef short ribs, and you're gonna love them too. Thanks for joining me out at the grill, and remember to like and subscribe. See you again next time.
So on that, I would invite Chef Gavin just to talk to us a little bit more about the trend that we're seeing with food to travel well and your research in regards of the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace. Hello, Chef.
Hey, how are you? So, as we've seen in cooking steaks, you know that just marbling in itself offers a great insurance policy. It really does provide that steak to have a lot more tenderness, a lot more juiciness in just the basic cooking of it, but it also lends itself to helping it travel well as well, because having that marbling in there provides the juiciness so that even if it is cooked and it sits for a while, it's still going to retain that moisture. As well as if you think towards maybe more of those end cuts. A lot of times people think of end cuts and they think of the fact that it's being slow cooked and that the collagen's breaking down, that's inherently going to make it tender and juicy. And it will break down, it will make it tender, but the juicy factor isn't necessarily there as much without the high marbling. you think that maybe because you're braising in a wet cooking method, that that because it's in liquid, it will provide for more moisture content within the beef. Well, the beef isn't actually absorbing any of that liquid. It's cooking in it. It's braising, but the natural marbling in that beef is really what's going to provide a lot of that flavor and a lot of that juiciness during that long of a cook. It's that added insurance policy for a long cook, especially if you're doing something like smoking, whether it be a brisket or short ribs on the smoker. That's a lot drier of a climate, and you will have some humidity within the smoker, but when you're trying to smoke something like that, that inherent marbling is gonna give it that much more juiciness in the end product.
So we're familiar with the marbling score for the middle cuts, and the beauty that we have known now is that there's a connection between high marbled beef and good oleic acid, and we're seeing that more and more being reported in the news.
Yeah, and the intramuscular fat that is really what provides so much of that oleic acid. And when you have high amounts of marbling, that's where you're going to get all that oleic acid from.
So on that, that's really interesting because again, I've been able to sample some of your recipe, and I've always been amazed of everything you do. The beauty that we have with Certifying This Beef, we have 6 culinary chefs that are pushing the envelope of culinary trends and idea around the beef carcass utilization. But what's interesting is the approach that we have also to find ways to have merchandising idea that really helps you to travel well in regards of Chef Gavin. I know you've tested some of those cooked sous vide steak that people can only pan sear quickly at home, or you're seeing that as a trend also that could be possible for a restaurateur to invite.
The great thing about sous vide is it's something that you can use as a way to slowly bring up your steak to temperature. And I've tried it both ways, where you actually sear ahead of time and then allow it to cool, vacuum seal, and then cook up to temperature, so that all the customer then would have to do is they get it home in the sous vide bag, and then they would just have to barely just touch it in the pan just to re-crisp the exterior, because you've already developed that the flavor on the surface of the meat. Or you could just go straight into the bag, fully seasoned with some aromatics, and then when the customer gets it home, just lightly pat it dry and then season it or sear it in an extremely hot skillet for just a few minutes at a time, just to develop that crust. And then you can have that restaurant experience with very little effort at home.
And again, the reason I wanted to highlight the short ribs, the short rib is more and more popular. Again, it's an item that you have to know really well how to maximize the value. It is, when it's done perfectly, it's just showing so much versatility and offering, even in the gourmet presentation or the traditional Korean grill that you just had as a recipe today, Chef Gavin.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this wonderful ideation and discussion around short ribs, especially the Korean short ribs, which are just my favorite. And remember, if it's not certified, it's not the best. Make sure you visit it, certifiedangusbeef.com, for more information. Thanks so much.